It's often been said that competition is what drives progress, and that without competition, we would be left in stagnation where nothing changes and nothing improves. It has been theorized that the very thing that led to the emergence of human beings as Homo sapiens sapiens was barbaric competition for resources on the savannas of Africa. It's not too much of an exaggeration to say that competition is built into our DNA. America's entire economic system is based around competition, the idea of capitalism, and an invisible hand progressing our society through brutal competition between corporations is a cornerstone of the late 20th and early 21st century. So when the statement is made that Samsung is nothing more than a copycat or pale imitation of Apple, it isn't an insult, it's recognition as a vital cog in the machine that is our modern day economy. A much more nightmarish scenario would be one in which there was no copycat or competitor to Apple, and in where the smartphone market was cornered in stagnation. However, is it really accurate to call Samsung a copycat? Sure, Apple invented the iPhone, and initially it may have been accurate to call Samsung a copycat, but every year Samsung has been improving to the point where the case can be made for Samsung having a higher quality product at a cheaper price. It then could be argued, what with the rapid iterations Samsung has made on its technology, that Apple has become the copy. Regardless of this, we can be assured that Samsung will never be Apple. Why is this? Why is it that no matter how well Samsung markets their smartphone or adds new features with explosive proof design, they can't seem to touch Apple in the amount of phones shipped? Except for the fact that they can't. Samsung regularly sells as many Galaxies as Apple each year, going so far as to actually beat Apple in the amount of units sold. I know this may seem shocking, but it gets even more surprising. Less surprising if you've seen my video called Why Apple is Not a Tech Company. But regardless, despite Samsung selling more units than Apple, it doesn't come close to it on amount of profit. Apple, clocking in as the #1 most profitable company in existence, made about $20.6 billion in Q1 2018, while Samsung recorded an all-time high profit of $15 billion. And this is with all of Samsung's sectors combined, like its microprocessor business along with its chip manufacturing. This is 25% less profit than Apple, while selling more units. How is this possible? The reasons for this massive gap in revenue all comes to a collection of factors in the Apple ecosystem that make it almost impervious to competition from natural competitors in its market. Of the multitude of factors present in Apple, there are two main ones that have the biggest influence on Apple's tremendous profit. Number one being a little something called margin. You see, profit can be measured as simply as costs versus retail price. The larger the disparity between these two numbers, the more money or margin a company makes on each unit. An Apple viewer or smartphone or whatever costs the company about $219 to manufacture, and then retails at a price of $650. That is 66% profit margin that any company in existence would kill for. It is essentially Apple turning lead into gold. It's a company selling you on something that is actually extremely cheap to make. Compare this 66% profit margin to Samsung's Galaxy profit margin on their iPhone 7 equivalent, the Samsung Galaxy S8. The Samsung Galaxy S8 costs around $307 for Samsung to make, yet retails at a price of around $850. That's a 42% profit margin, which isn't bad when you consider that Apple's profit margin is 20% higher than Samsung's is. The ridiculous amount of profit Apple gets begins to make a lot more sense. But this isn't where the money trail ends. It only gets better from here as we further examine the methods to the madness of Apple having a profit share of over 90% in the smartphone market while barely selling 13% of the unit. For this section of the commentary, I'm going to be sourcing my content from popular videos on YouTube called The Grand Theory of Apple and Why Apple is a Game Company. Essentially, what these videos cover is the second factor in Apple's success that allows it to squeeze gold from silicon wafers and circuit boards. Essentially what Apple does that Samsung can't seem to replicate is establishing an ecosystem. An ecosystem being Apple's iOS or Google's Android. What Apple managed to do was gain complete control of this ecosystem, which conferred upon them a massive advantage. This control over the iOS allows them to further monetize their customers with no cost to them, as well as creating a platform where they can control exactly how much profit from each product they get while keeping customers engaged and in love with the Apple brand. What Apple realized is while they have the resources to compete with Samsung, wouldn't it be better if they didn't compete with Samsung at all, but instead created their own money printing machine in a market of entirely its own creation? So now you see why it simply ain't possible for Samsung to beat Apple. Apple just isn't playing the same game as Samsung. It could be said that they aren't even competing in the same space. While they both sell a similar device, that's about where the similarities end. While Samsung continues to do battle with hundreds of thousands of other Android brands and Chinese knockoffs, Apple is in a league of its own, and because of this, it stays on top. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe.